In 1904, over 1,000 mothers and children boarded the General Slocum for a church picnic. Within 30 minutes, the ship was on fire and every piece of safety equipment on board was about to fail. But how could that happen when it all passed a federal safety inspection just 6 weeks before? This is the General Slocum disaster. The morning of June 15, 1904 began like any other. Mothers dressed their children in their Sunday best, excited for the 17th annual excursion with the St. Mark's Evangelical Church. Over 1,000 women and children gathered on the pier ready to board the General Slocum, a 250-foot wooden sidewheel steamship, completely unaware they would never make it to the Locust Grove picnic site on Long Island. The ship departed at 9:30 a.m. from Manhattan and everything seemed normal. But not long after leaving, crew members started noticing something concerning coming from below deck. But by the time they found the source, the flames were already getting out of control. The fire had started deep in the forward storage area where oil lamps and cleaning supplies were kept. Over the years, spilled oil and flammable materials had saturated the floorboards. It only needed a spark from a match or a tossed cigarette. It was now 10 a.m., and word of the fire finally reached Captain William Van Schaik. Instead of immediately turning the ship toward the shore, he decided to charge ahead at full speed, hoping to make it the short distance away to North Brother Island. The increased speed just fanned and fed the flames, forcing the fire from the front of the ship to the back where all of the desperate passengers were. It was 10:10 a.m. when they finally landed at North Brother Island, but the worst was still to come. The flames had completely taken over the side of the ship that was closest to the shore, blocking the passengers from jumping to land. They were left with only one choice: jump into the East River. Most of the passengers could not swim, and their heavy wool clothing soaked up water almost immediately, dragging them down as soon as they hit the river. And while all of this was happening, the ship's paddle wheel was still turning. People were being pulled into it and struck by it as they tried to escape. But why were they jumping and not utilizing the many lifeboats and life jackets on board? The ship carried all the safety equipment you'd expect to find on a ship, and yet one by one, every safeguard they relied on failed when they needed it the most. Mothers put the life preservers on their children and threw them overboard and just watched them sink. It turns out the manufacturer was trying to cut costs and used cheap, lightweight cork. To make up the required weight and bring it up to code, they added iron bars to the cork. They were basically strapping weighted vests to their chests. Additionally, they had been hung above the deck unprotected from the elements for 13 years. They were completely degraded, crumbling apart in their hands. The lifeboats were also inaccessible. They had been chained to the deck to keep them in place, but the locks had been painted over, completely sealing the mechanism. By the time help arrived, the ship had sank, and the East River was filled with bodies. Nearby boats rushed to help. Police officers, construction workers, and hospital staff all participated in the rescue efforts. Their efforts were in vain. 1,021 people died. For days, more bodies would wash ashore, torturing the families that would have to identify them. The streets were full of funeral processions. Over 600 families lost a loved one, and the tight-knit community of Little Germany would never be the same. And the public outcry forced President Teddy Roosevelt to order an investigation. It turns out, just 6 weeks before the fire, the General Slocum had passed a federal safety inspection. But it was anything but safe. Take the fire hoses, for example. Federal regulations required them to be tested under 100 pounds of water pressure, but inspectors later admitted they never actually tested them. They simply looked them over and marked them as being in good condition. During the fire, those same hoses burst almost immediately when the crew tried to use them. The life preservers weren't much better. As mentioned earlier, many of them were more than a decade old. Yet inspectors casually looked over them and threw out a few that looked really bad. The problems didn't stop there. The crew had never performed a fire drill. Many had little idea what to do once the fire started or how to manage hundreds of panicked passengers trying to escape. So how did all of this pass inspection? The investigation found no evidence of corruption or bribery. Instead, it pointed to incompetence, inadequate supervision, and a breakdown of safety procedures. 8 people were indicted, including Captain Van Schaik, 2 federal inspectors, and several people from the Knickerbocker Steamboat Company. But as the trials unfolded, prosecutors struggled to secure convictions. One inspector faced multiple trials, but juries failed to reach a verdict. In the end, despite everything, only one person went to prison, Captain William Van Schaik. He was convicted of criminal negligence for failing to properly maintain fire safety equipment and train his crew for emergencies. He ultimately only served 3 years of his 10-year prison sentence, after President Taft pardoned him in 1912. But the disaster's impact went far beyond the loss of a single ship. Many of the victims came from Manhattan's Little Germany, one of the largest German immigrant communities in America. The loss was so severe that the neighborhood never recovered. Families left, businesses closed, and the community slowly disappeared. More than a century later, the General Slocum disaster is still remembered, although not nearly as widely as tragedies like the Titanic. A memorial stands in New York honoring the victims, and St. Mark's Church still stands today, although it was converted into a synagogue in 1940. But perhaps the most remarkable connection to the disaster was a woman named Adela Witherspoon. On the day of the tragedy, Adela was just 6 months old, making her the youngest survivor of the General Slocum. She would go on to live for another century, passing away in 2004 at the age of 100. When asked why so few people seem to remember the General Slocum, she simply said, "The Titanic had a great many famous people on it, and this was just a family picnic." The General Slocum remains one of the deadliest maritime disasters in American history, and a reminder of what can happen when safety becomes an afterthought and profits come before people.